Imagine this for a second. A huge corporate standoff. You've got a top executive, the director of human resources, and he's being accused of record tampering and insubordination by his own CEO. But his defense? He claims he wasn't breaking the rules. He was the only one actually following them. This is a story about what happens when the person in charge and the official rulebook are on a collision course. And it all really boils down to this one simple but incredibly tough question. You're faced with a direct order from your boss, but it seems to go against the company's official procedures. So what do? Do you follow the order, or do you follow the rules? All right, so let's set the scene. Our story takes place at NALCO, which is a major public sector company in India. And at the heart of this whole conflict are two men, right at the very top of the corporate ladder. Their clash over a single promotion process would end up sparking a formal inquiry and, well, have consequences that would change their careers forever. Okay, so on one side, you've got Shri Radhashyam Mahapatro. He's the director of human resources, and he's the one who ends up being the charged officer. His whole argument is that his actions were all about defending company policy. And on the other side, that's his boss, Shri Sridhar Patra, the chairman and managing director, or CMD for short. He's the main accuser and the key witness for management, and his story is that his director of HR willfully disobeyed him and illegally changed records. Okay, before we dive any deeper into this, we've got to get a handle on two key terms that you're going to hear a lot. First is the DPC, the Departmental Promotion Committee. That's just a group of people who decide who gets promoted. And second, we have the R&P rules, the recruitment and promotion rules. You could think of this as the company's official constitution for how promotions are supposed to be done. It's the rule book. Now, this is really important. Before we even get to the specific charges of tampering or insubordination, you have to understand that these two men had completely different ideas about how the promotion process was even supposed to work. This disagreement is the root of the entire conflict. First, let's look at the process that the director of HR, Shri Mahapatro, was fighting for. According to him, the company's own R&P rules laid out a very structured, numbers-based system. Each member of the promotion committee has to independently give marks to candidates across 4 different categories. And if they can't all agree on a candidate, you don't just take a vote. The rules say you have to average everyone's scores to get a final objective ranking. But now, let's look at the totally different process the CMD, Shri Patra, was pushing. In his version, the assessment sheets were prepared by someone else, centrally, and then circulated with the marks already typed in. Committee members were basically just asked to sign off on it. And what if there's a disagreement? Well, the CMD argued for a simple majority rule. The people with the most votes win. So you see the massive difference here. One system is about individual, data-driven assessment, and the other is about centralized agreement and majority rule. Okay, so with that fundamental clash of procedures in mind, let's get into the first major charge that was thrown at the director of HR. Management called it tampering. But as you're about to see, the definition of that one little word is really at the heart of this whole fight. The accusation from the CMD was incredibly direct and honestly pretty severe. He claimed that the director of HR illegally went in and changed the marks on an officially approved document after the decision had been made, which ended up changing who got promoted. So here's how the CMD laid it all out. He said that on September 8th, he issued an official note approving the promotions based on what he called the majority consent of the committee. But then, after he did that, the director of HR and the director of finance went back and put in their own different scores. From the CMD's perspective, his note had finalized the process. The book was closed. Anything that happened after that to change the outcome wasn't a disagreement. It was tampering. But the director of HR, Shri Mahapatro, he looked at that exact same sequence of events and came to a completely opposite conclusion. For him, this wasn't tampering at all. It was just completing an unfinished job.
His argument was actually pretty simple. How can you possibly tamper with the document that isn't even finished yet? He pointed out that on September 8th, both he and the director of finance still hadn't submitted their final independent scores as required. He argued, hey, tampering is when you change someone else's record. All I did was enter my own marks, which the R&P rules say I have to do. He wasn't breaking the rules, he was doing his duty.
And this brings us right to the second major charge, which really escalates this whole conflict. It goes from being a debate about procedure to a question of raw authority. Was the director of HR's first duty to his boss, or was it to a higher power, the rulebook itself? The CMD's argument here was pretty much black and white. He gave a direct, lawful order, and his subordinate, the director of HR, willfully and repeatedly refused to carry it out. Simple as that. And if you look at the timeline from the CMD's point of view, it looks pretty damning.
On September 8th, he orders all the promotion letters to be sent out. The director of HR doesn't do it. Then, a few days later, on September 12th, the HR director finally issues the promotion orders, but for a completely different list of people, a list based on those average scores, not the CMD's majority list. From where management was sitting, this was a crystal clear breakdown in the chain of command.
But, once again, the director of HR painted a completely different picture of his actions. He argued that this wasn't an act of defiance against his boss. No, this was an act of loyalty to the company's own laws.
And this argument gets right to the absolute core of this entire conflict. The director of HR's position was that his ultimate responsibility wasn't to his immediate boss, but to the board-approved R&P rules. He basically said that the CMD's order to promote people based on some unwritten majority rule idea was improper, and because it was improper, it wasn't actually a lawful order he had to follow. So in his mind, he wasn't being insubordinate. He was being a good corporate citizen.
So the story gets even juicier from here, because the charged officer, the director of HR, started to present evidence that suggested that this wasn't just some one-off disagreement. He argued it was part of a larger pattern of behavior, and maybe even personal bias.
Now check out this timeline, because this is fascinating. The whole fight over the promotions happened between September 8 and 12, and it was all based on the CMD's majority rule idea. But it was only on September 26th, after the whole controversy had blown up, that the CMD actually brought the concept of majority rule to the board for discussion. The charged officer used this to argue that it was a clear case of trying to get approval for a rule after you've already broken it.
And get this, the CMD's own words during the inquiry were pretty telling. According to the official record, when he was asked some really pointed questions, like why he didn't even attend the interviews he was awarding marks for, or what specific rule allowed his majority decision method, this was his go-to response, over and over. This question is irrelevant.
But maybe the most explosive piece of evidence came from a totally separate performance review. The official reviewing authority, the Secretary of the Ministry of Mines, had actually overruled a low performance rating that the CMD had given to the director of HR. And he put it in writing, saying the CMD has been unfair and does not come clean. This was used to argue that a history of bias was there long before this whole promotion mess even began. So, after all the testimony, the charges, and the counterarguments, what finally happened to the two men at the center of this storm? Well, the outcome could not have been more different for each of them. The final tally is, well, it's pretty stark. The CMD, Shri Radhashyam, the man who used an unwritten procedure, he enjoyed a full ceremonious retirement. He received all of his pension and retirement benefits. He faced 0 official consequences. Meanwhile, the director of HR, Shri Mahapatro, the man who insisted on following the written rules, was suspended for 6 months. His retirement benefits were held up for over a year, and his professional reputation was left tarnished.
And so the story of this one promotion dispute really leaves us with a provocative question that goes way beyond just this one company. In any large organization, in any institution, where does the real power lie? Is it with the person at the very top of the org chart? Or is it inside the pages of the rulebook they are supposed to follow?